worked. It's like magic.
Angel.
That's amazing. Oh my God. I haven't done an IG Live in so long.
Well, welcome back. We are happy to have you.
Thanks.
Yes.
Thanks for having me. What'd you say?
Where are you joining us from?
Oh, I'm in Phoenix right now. Actually, I feel like my screen is... All right. Sometimes I can't tell if the screen is dirty. I'm like, am I in like the wrong angle? Yeah, so I'm in Phoenix right now, which is Hohokam territory. The Hohokam is the tribe that was here actually well before settler colonization. And in fact, in Phoenix, a lot of people don't know this, but a lot of the canals that are here are actually originally the Hohokam canals, because the Hohokam had one of the most complex irrigation systems in the entire world. They sent irrigation paths from the Salt River throughout the entire desert, and they regreened the desert. The Tohono O'odham Nation, which is in southern Arizona, believe that or they say that the Hohokam people were their people. And if you guys don't know, the Tohono O'odham Nation in southern Arizona, they're currently fighting for their lands that are being destroyed and desecrated with Trump's border wall.
So how
little tidbit. Where am I? Where am I?
Awareness on here. Yeah.
Gotta give you like the whole story though.
What can we do that is more than being social justice warriors? Is there anything we can do?
Oh man. Well, I think right now, especially the week of Thanksgiving, it really starts with honoring the land that you're on. So doing research and finding whose land are you on. That's like the first step, right? Because the needs there's no like one size fits all, because the needs of different cultures and different people and different nations and different lands, like they're all so different. So there's no easy answer to that, but it begins with finding out whose land you're on, whose land are you living on, and how can you begin to support the sovereignty of those people? In California, in LA where we live, it's mostly Chumash and Tongva territory, and all of the missionized Indians, meaning that when the Spaniards came, they put a lot of the coastal tribes in the mission system. They don't receive federal recognition. And so there's a huge land back rematriation effort. If you are in the Bay Area, the Ohlone people, which are the native people of the Bay Area, have started an opt-in, like a tax system that you can basically pay them a tax every year, and that money goes towards the rematriation of lands. And so, it's really unique where you are. If you're in San Diego, the Kumeyaay people, who I'm involved with, are literally fighting for their land sovereignty, fighting to have access to their ceremonial sites, and fighting to stop the border wall that is completely senseless, on their ancestral lands, which never had any tribal consent.
Right. So a few questions.
Yeah.
I love that we just got right into it.
Yeah, we just got right into it.
It's super important, we don't need to fluff around. My first experience with Native American culture was living in Arizona for 4 years.
Yeah.
And, I would go to Native American church to, the sweat lodges of the Navajo in Guadalupe.
Yeah.
That to me was the most religious experience I've ever had, was being in the sweat lodges, because I love that, you bring them the tobacco, and then you have to say a prayer for yourself first, because if you're not praying for yourself, how can you pray for anyone else? And
I love that.
And then after you pray for yourself, you pray for your family, your loved ones, and everybody's sitting around in a circle, and everybody's saying their prayers out loud, and you feel the vibrations of everybody putting this energy
Yeah.
but you don't really hear what anyone is saying, you know what I mean, because you're so in your own thoughts.
Yeah.
After you pray for the people in your life, then you pray for the world as a whole. And I love that system. I thought it was so beautiful. So yeah, I think Native American culture, Indigenous culture throughout the world, period, is super important.
Throughout the world. We've talked so much about that. Because you know what? The truth is, we're all Indigenous people. We are all Indigenous to the earth, and we all come from Indigenous people. What does Indigenous mean? Indigenous comes from the Greek in Gaia, in and of the earth. Gaia is the earth.
I didn't know that.
Yes, Indigenous, in Gaia. We are in and of the earth. And even though lots of us have been detribalized, like myself as a Latina, you know what I mean, with lots of mixed ancestry that includes Indigenous ancestry from these lands, which includes Indigenous North African ancestry, which includes Jewish ancestry, which includes European ancestry, West Asian, you know, a lot of Latinos we're very mixed, but we do carry the blood of the First Nations people of the land, but a lot of us have been detribalized. And so sometimes by respectfully participating in and supporting Indigenous practices, wherever you are in the world, right? You can start to reconnect with your own Indigenous ancestry, your own Indigenous ancestors, and the way that they lived in and of the land.
So, yeah, so let's talk about that, because did you grow up like in touch with your Indigenous ancestry, or how did you get into the journey of delving it deeper into like Indigenous cultures and your own?
Well, I mean, I grew up super Latina. Like, I grew up in like Arizona. I grew up in like a super Latino neighborhood. I went to like church in Spanish, and I don't know. I think like one of my first realizations that like something was up, or there was some kind of like disconnect, was I grew up Catholic, and I was in church, and we were praying and standing and sitting and like crossing ourselves to a Jesus that was white, from a land where he probably wasn't white. You know what I mean?
Right.
He was like Jewish, Middle Eastern. But there were all these images, these white images above us. And my entire church, I went to a Hispanic church. We were all like brown haired people. So I looked into a sea of like these like black haired, brown haired people, like brown people. And we were all standing and sitting and praying and I'm like, well, wait a second, there's something up with this. And then Juan Diego, the whole story about him, and seeing La Virgen de Guadalupe, and somehow I started like making these connections. I'm like, wait a second, what am I really praying to? Like, now myself, I pray to the forest. If I sing to the Father, I sing to like Father trees. You know what I mean? If I sing to the Mother, I'm singing to the earth. I'm singing to all women. I really do believe that you could look at a culture and see how we treat their women, and that's how they treat the land. You know, in our culture, we are extracting resources of the land. We're raping the land, right? And we're desecrating the land. And guess what we do to women? We're desecrating women. You know what I mean? There is the perpetual like murder of, there's the murdered and missing Indigenous women is like an entire movement, because Indigenous women in particular are missing and murdered at super high rates. You know, what are we doing to all women? What are we doing to trans women? What are we doing? I mean, like when we look at women, like that's to me, a woman is the earth. You know what I mean? The health of the earth, the health of the people, the health of women, the way we treat the earth, like it's all full circle. It's not, there's no disconnect there. And so I think at some point, I guess if you want to know when like my journey began, in some ways it began like that day at church that a light bulb went off.
How old were you?
I was probably 17. Also kind of mystical things, like I was in church and I was going down the procession at around 16, 17. And it was one of two times that I've gotten, a spirit came into my body, and I had this like dark non-human spirit that came into my body as I was being initiated into the Catholic Church. It was like super weird. So I don't know, weird mystical experiences, but I don't know. I don't think we might not be heading down that road of mystical stuff. But yeah, I think I also was always really interested in my own ancestry, and the easiest ancestry for me to access was my mother's people. Because it's funny, because I didn't grow up with like consciously like in Indigenous practices, but you know, there's so much that my parents and especially my mom have taught us that I've gone back and been like, oh, you were teaching me to make tobacco offerings. Like, oh, I'll show you this. Oh my gosh. Now that I'm here.
Loving the red rocks in the back.
I'm back. Oh yeah, this is my mommy's house. So this is an akiko. This is a statue that I grew up with, right? You can see it's like a statue of like a pre-Columbian like man, I guess, like an indigenous man from South America. He's wearing like the Andes. This statue is like, I don't know, probably older than me. My mom brought it from Argentina.
And that's crystals in it, right?
My mom put the crystals because she's a G. But, you know, typically, like, so people, honestly, a lot of, like, women pray to the Akiko when they're, like, having trouble with their husbands or whatever. But we grew up praying to the Akiko. And my mom would get these cigarettes, would buy cigarettes and feed it into the mouth of the akiko, right? And when I moved to New York, I moved to Brooklyn. What's up? We both lived in Brooklyn. I know you're from there. When I moved to Brooklyn, I've gotten a akiko for myself for my own home. And I remember thinking, like, I am never doing cigarette offerings. Like, that's so gross. And I would give it incense because I thought I was, like, way more enlightened than my mom. And I was I was cooking in my kitchen in Topanga Canyon because I moved to Topanga about 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago. And I was sitting in my kitchen, and there's a creek across the way that, and tobacco was growing in the creek, like a wild tobacco. The spirit of that wild tobacco came in through the window and kind of like spoke to me and said, you remember those like cigarette offerings that your mom was giving the akiko? And I remember being like, oh yeah. And she's like, no, those cigarette offerings, those were tobacco offerings. That was your mom showing you how to give tobacco offerings, you know? And I've noticed like so much of that, so many of the things that my mom has taught me. And I'm like, oh, actually this is like handed down from something else that like, so I don't think consciously I ever grew up with that, but I think that there's no way that you can live. I mean, it's really unlikely that you're living in the United States or in the Americas at all, and you don't have indigenous technologies or practices passed down to you in some ways. You know, there's no way, like even the food we eat, like it's so much comes from the indigenous people of the land that you live on. And even if we recognize it or not, that's just the truth of what it is. And there's the continued erasure and the ongoing oppression of Native people, but that doesn't erase the fact they have contributed so much, you know?
Right. Do you think, because you mentioned before, like the way we treat our women, the way that a society will treat Earth, do you think that the society on Earth that treats their women the way they treat their Earth in a positive light?
Oh, is there a society on Earth?
Yeah.
Oh man, that's such a good question. You know, sometimes it's so easy to define ourselves by what we don't want to be. You know what I mean? Like when we are trying to fight against a system where we start to define ourselves by what we are not, you know? And that's actually something that I'm trying to do within myself, is I am trying to actually not just define myself by what I'm not, but I'm trying to look towards positive examples of things that I want to work towards. So that's a really good question. I'm going to have to think about that. Okay. I know that within all of our circles, you know, like there's healing to happen. It feels like there's healing to happen everywhere. You know, it feels like the pervasiveness of colonization has reached every crevice of the earth. But maybe that's not true. Maybe that's my own idea. I know that there are people that are completely uncontacted. There are 8 tribes in the Amazon that are completely uncontacted. So yeah, that's something to look towards. Right. And it's also something to look towards in the future, right? Like if we want to build a new earth, which I truly believe we need to do, especially as we're entering the age of Aquarius. Yeah, totally. We are. I mean, we're going through a great transition. Like we can all see it. 2020, hello. But we have to have a vision of what we want in the future. We have to have a vision of how we want to treat women, how we want to treat our divine feminine, because we all have divine feminine inside of us. Men have it too. You know, I have divine masculine inside of us.
Sacred masculine and divine feminine, the synergy of both of those together.
Yes.
Radiant human being.
Yes.
Yeah. So
to answer your question about ancestry, though, I do want to say that I do have, on my dad's side, I had to do so much digging because I've been so disconnected from that part of my ancestry.
And both of your parents are from Argentina, right?
Both my parents are from Argentina. My dad was raised basically in Indian country in in a state called Salta, which is very indigenous part of Argentina in northern Argentina. But his ancestry comes from Las Pampas, which is kind of like a coastal desert region at the base of the Andes, at the base of the mountains that extends all the way up until the coast. And he also has mixed ancestry from other places as well. But it wasn't until a friend of mine, Florencia, who's also Argentinian, asked me about my ancestry. And I remember I just told her my mom's ancestry was so easy. Like my mom's ancestry is is they were from a clan called the Abuin, which means two tribes that originated in the Saudi Arabia, Yemen region, and they traveled through North Africa and into Spain. And it was so easy for me to like talk about that. And I realized, I'm like, oh wait, I never really have done a deep dive into my father's ancestry, because I feel very disconnected from the masculine and disconnected from my own father in a lot of ways. And you know, that reflects a part of myself.
Right.
And my friend said, well, I'm Italian and Mapuche, you know, and I know that I'm part Italian also. And to hear that she's like Mapuche and Italian, and I'm like, whoa. And it was like this culture, like something woke up in me. And it was as if the cultural amnesia that I had been experiencing, probably as a survival tactic, you know, it wasn't long ago that if you were Indian, you had a price put on your head, especially in Argentina. You know, for someone to cut off your hand or to cut off your head and give it to the government, you would get paid for that. And so there was this hiding that a lot of people went into, you know, including my own ancestors probably went into hiding of who they were. And so it was as if when I heard someone else recognize their own ancestry that was so similar to mine, it was as if something woke up inside of me, and that like sleeper cell like kind of woke up, and I was like, oh, wait a second, that's me too.
Right.
But I think that that's possible for everyone. I think as you meet other expanders, or you meet other people that are living in their authenticity, it wakes something up in you so that you can be like, oh, cool, that's the part of me that I have inside too.
You were the first person to inspire me, like, you know, to do 23andMe, which obviously is not the end all be all of searching for your genetic truth. But, you know, it was when you were talking to me about your mixed bag, you know, I was like, wow, like I know so many parts of my mixed bag ancestry as well, you know, and I just needed that little push to be like, yes, I am these things, you know, like I have Gypsy ancestry, Romani ancestry. And I always knew that my whole life. Like I want to get the Russian word for Gypsy tattooed on me. It was always said to me in like a negative connotation, but I never took it in a negative way, because I was like, yeah, I am a Gypsy. And then, then I started seeing like, oh wait, they don't mean that in a compliment. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
not nice. And then when I saw it on my ancestry, it just, you know, it wasn't surprising. It was something I had always known, but just like seeing that little fact, like, yeah, you know, and I don't know those ancestors, you know, I don't know anything about them, but I feel connected to them, because it's like what you were saying before about your mother, even like, doing the tobacco offering. It's like, you know, our genes, our DNA is connected to our ancestors, regardless of if we know or anything, you know, because all of those cells are like passed down to us. And so thank you for like bringing me closer to genetic truth as well.
And you're part Yakut also, right?
Oh my God, I love that you remember that.
Yeah, I remember that. Well, I remember the conversation. I remember us talking about this, and I remember you like breaking it down to me. I remember that.
So that shit is actually crazy. I could talk about genetic ancestry and where people are from all day. I find that so fascinating, you know, because it's so rare to meet people that are 100% something, you know, like even if you,
I don't know if that's possible.
I know, like even if you think you are, like you're not, you know?
No, migration is so natural. Migration has always happened. We've always roamed around the earth. That's why it's funny to me, like this border wall. I'm like, who are you trying to keep out? Like we have always roamed. We have always migrated. Like that's just the nature of humans. All animals migrate. Butterflies migrate. Hummingbirds migrate. Jaguars. Like in Arizona, like literally one of the many like ecological like BS things about this wall is that the jaguars are barely starting to come back into Arizona. Yes, we have jaguars in Arizona. And yes, they migrate.
Okay.
They migrate between Mexico and the United States. And so to me, I'm like, if you're going to build a wall like the wall was designed so that seeds can go through and birds can go through and lizards can go through, but people can't go through. And I'm like, that doesn't even make sense, because then the jaguars can't go through. And I'm like, it's so arbitrary who we let through and who we don't let through. You know, it doesn't even make sense.
That's affected jaguars?
The jaguar population?
Yeah, like how it's...
You know, I don't know if it's affected them yet. I do know that this border wall is affecting other creatures, like as we speak, because on on Tohono O'odham territory, there's a river that runs through there, and the aquifer in the Sonoran Desert is like super precious, because we actually have over 3,000 different just flora species that grow here, not to even mention all the rare animals that survive out here.
Which is great. People think of a desert, they don't think of 300 different species of flora.
It's so green. It's a green desert, yes. And thanks to Indigenous people, because Indigenous people all over the world are the ones that have planted food forests and have, you know, cultivated seeds and propagated, you know, propagated plants and stuff. So, but they are currently digging into, on national land, on BLM land, Bureau of Land Management, they're drilling into the ground to extract water, which will lower the aquifer. And if the aquifer gets low enough, which if they continue to build this wall, it will, they're going to deplete the rivers that are running. And there are some rare fish, toads, etc., that need that river to survive, that need those water systems to survive. And so I can't say if it's affecting the jaguars right now, because the jaguar, a lot of their migration paths are apparently through the mountains, and there haven't been border walls put onto the mountains yet. Right. But there are definitely other animals that are being affected right now, you know, including people. Including people, because we're nature. Like we are the land.
Our animals too, and like we forget that.
Yeah.
Like, the whole purpose of even having this conversation with you is like, I feel like you're so connected to being a part of nature, and I really admire that about you, because, you know, I strive every day to be connected to nature in some way, and I feel like my soul is very connected to nature, even if my like body isn't, you know, like my soul and my mind are so connected to the world around me. But yeah, I think that's really beautiful, because when you were living in New York, you were even foraging in
I was. The tree started speaking to me. Oh my gosh. So yeah, when I was living in New York, I remember, like, I grew up in Arizona on this, like, there's a mountain behind here, and it runs through the center of Phoenix like a spine. And in some ways, growing up, I felt like I was straddling these two worlds. Like I was straddling the plant and the natural world, and me just being in it and part of it. And then there was a street in front of my house. And, you know, the neighborhood around my house is not like, at least in the 90s, it was not like the safest neighborhood. And so I really do feel like I was bridging, or I was like straddling these two worlds. And someone asked me recently, like, are you a shaman? And I'm like, well, let me tell you, when I was growing up, I was bridging these two worlds. So I kind of feel like that's just been my programming since I was little, to continue straddling these two worlds. And when I moved to New York, I was so nature deficient that I would look around, and when I would see a plant that was growing from the concrete, I just had to know who that person was, you know? And I think that that's actually, I don't know, maybe something that's been intrinsic in me. Maybe it's something from my mom, I'm not sure. But I've always seen rivers and mountains and plants as people, you know? They're non-human people, but they're people. 100%. And there's no reason why they shouldn't be granted personhood, which is a whole other discussion, but they're people, you know? And so I always wanted to know, when I was in New York, I wanted to know who these people were, you know, that were so strong and resilient to be growing. And in many ways, I really wanted to be like them. I wanted to share their attributes of resilience, because I lived in New York for about 7 years, but I had a hard time in the wintertime. There were certain things that I had a hard time with, you know, in terms of the weather, in terms of acclimating to like the completely concrete jungle. And then there are other things that I just like freaking loved about New York. You know what I mean? Like I really became who I am and became an adult there. But I ended up moving into this apartment, and we had this huge yard in Brooklyn. And I started just observing for the first year or two that I was living there, who was growing. And I just became fascinated with who was growing on this land, and what I could do to support their sovereignty, and what I could do to help them in their growth. And I ended up learning all about these plants. I ended up learning that so many of the plants were edible, or I could use as teas. And once I started eating from the land, I started becoming rooted in place. And I do think that it's to our detriment that we're eating foods that have a different vibrational resonance than the land that we're living on. You know, and as an herbalist, I teach this to my students all the time, that when we start eating from the land that we're living on and drinking the water from the local watersheds, what we're doing is we're intaking information the information from exactly the place that we're on how to survive. And, you know, our circadian rhythms are really dictated by the natural environment, including the sun that we take in, including the Schumann resonance that's coming off of the earth, what we eat, what we drink, etc. And so a lot of us feel really unrooted, and we feel like we have no place in our society, and we have this individualist mentality, which is actually false, because we couldn't be humans and living without the plants.
Right.
You know, you're eating plants all the time, whether they're coming from far away or they're from the land that you're living on. We're eating plants, and that's the way that we're surviving. So yeah.
I have a question. So for people, because, you know, for me too, like I get overwhelmed because, you know, I didn't even really realize how deprived I was of like being knowledgeable about, you know, where my food comes from, the plants, like, you know, not even knowing, you know, that, you know, what grows on trees and what comes out of the earth, like at all, you know. And that's a big part of, like, you know, why I want to have a family in the Caribbean, is because, like, I want my kids to be way more like, you know, oh, there's a guava tree there and that's garlic growing over here. Like, I didn't know garlic grew on trees before. And so my question is, like, for people that, you know, live urban lifestyles, like, how can they be more in tune with the natural world around them, knowing where their food comes from, like, to source locally, I guess, like you were saying, other than like going to a farmer's market or something?
Totally. All right. Okay. To answer your question, Roxy, you know, if you want to start a revolution, start a garden. If you want to create food sovereignty, start a garden. If you want to teach your children to reconnect with the land, start a garden. If you want to
start a garden living in an apartment.
Oh, you can still garden. There's a lot of things. There are a lot of gardens. Number one, if you have a rooftop or if you have a plot of land in front. So I was lucky I had a backyard, but we also have this like square plot of land where like random plants grow, which is amazing. Like, thank you, plants, for volunteering. I don't call plants weeds. I think that that's a derogatory term. I also don't use the word dirt, because the word dirt, if you look at the etymology of the word, it's a derogatory term. I use the word earth, and I call the plants volunteers. You know, if you don't know what they are, you can call them a volunteer. Don't call them weeds, right? It's just like 101, like, we're dealing person to person. These are people, like, have respect. So so in a lot of buildings, there are plots of earth in front. Take over, guerrilla garden the plot of earth. Take ownership over that plot of earth. If you have a windowsill that's getting light, you know, there are some things that you can grow with a grow light. I started when I was in New York. One of the things that I started doing was novelty garden, and I've taught other people to do novelty gardens, novelty planters, novelty gardens on their fire escapes. You can plant on your fire escape. Oh, I've seen like the most amazing squash and kale gardens, like on fire escapes. Holy cow. And you know, that is going to reconnect you to the earth, right? That is going to reconnect you, because you're eating, even if it's not on the earth, if it's on your fire escape, you're still being rooted into the earth. It still has that Schumann resonance and the vibration of the earth. But start a garden. I'm telling you, we want to start a revolution. We need to garden. We need to achieve food sovereignty. And then the next step after that is like, all right, what are the native plants that like actually grow here? How can we identify them? I know that in Portland, there's an entire neighborhood where people started gardening, and they ended up jackhammering the sidewalk and turning all of their sidewalks into gardens. And I'm not mad at that, honestly. Like, that's the kind of guerrilla movement that we need.
Power to the plants.
Power to the plants, and power to the people. That is democracy. Demos, meaning the people. Gracia, meaning power. If we really want democracy, we need power to all people. And that includes the rivers, the mountains, the deserts, the stones, all plants and all animals, because they're all people and they all deserve personhood. Yes. That is what true democracy is.
I love it. I'm so passionate about this too, and it feels like I wish more people understood that, you know, because I feel like I don't know what was wired in human brains that so many humans feel like, you know, they're just people living on Earth as opposed to people being a part of Earth. So
I reposted something about that on my story today.
Really?
Yeah, it's like the I think the title is, if you go through my story, I post a lot.
I love posting about the plants, like the time lapse of the plants moving.
No, not that. It's about, I think it's like whitewashing. It starts with whitewashing, like whitewashing Indigenous history or food systems. I don't remember what it was, but it was a repost from Gather Film, which is a film that I suggest everybody watch on Thanksgiving as an anti-Thanksgiving and truth-giving event. But it's basically about how in colonial and settler colonial society, we see ourselves as separate from nature, but all Indigenous people, they see themselves as part of nature. Our Indigenous ancestors all saw themselves as part of nature. In fact, in most Indigenous languages, there's not even a word for nature because we just are part of nature. Like, there's no word for nature separate from ourselves. Like, that doesn't even make sense.
Right. That makes sense to me. So back to the Truthsgiving.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, let's talk a little bit about how we can decolonize Thanksgiving, and also because for a lot of people, like myself included, like I'm super against the idea of what Thanksgiving is, but it's such a cultural like staple, I guess, and like, oh well, this is the time we're gonna hang out with family and we're gonna have a beautiful dinner. Like even people that are super anti-Columbus, anti what Thanksgiving stands for, they're still in some way going to celebrate because they're going to like gather with their family. So I guess, how do we reclaim it and take it back, decolonize, make it more of a Truthsgiving? I love that.
Totally.
Actually, I celebrate Thanksgiving. So like,
cool. Cool. I love that.
Millions of turkeys are killed every year for your fucking Thanksgiving dinner.
Oh, shit. Yeah. Well, I don't eat animals. I haven't. Yeah, I became animal free since I was 6, even though that was a fight. My family, that was hard.
Believe in.
But last night, my mom made me like this amazing tofu dish, and my sister's also vegetarian. So I feel like, people everywhere are coming around. But so. Wait, what was the question? Was how to decolonize?
How we decolonize Thanksgiving, and
totally.
The concept of Truthsgiving, what that means. Did you come up with that?
Okay, so I think we need to reframe for Thanksgiving. I'm kind of realizing that if you just become anti something, like that's not gonna that usually doesn't work. But what you can do is you can occupy the spaces and give a reframe, right? So for years, like since Standing Rock, I have tried to do an anti-Thanksgiving with my family and not celebrate, and that has never worked. My family still gathers, we still have a meal, we still want to give thanks. I'm like, you know what, I think what we need is a reframe. And so this year, my sister-in-law and I, after this convo, I'm actually going over to her house. Oh, she's so wonderful. But I'm going over to my sister-in-law's house, and we're going to put together kind of like a Truthsgiving plan for our whole family of what we're going to do this Truthsgiving. And I actually, you know what, Roxy, on my computer, I actually wrote out like 5 ways, and I did it for this conversation, but I'm actually going to end up posting this on my Instagram. Great. But, all right, the 5 ways to decolonize, to begin the process of decolonizing Thanksgiving. Because what Thanksgiving is, it's a fictionalized mythology that perpetuates colonial violence, right? And it's full of untruths, and it's fictionalized and mythological. Like, it's not real. You know what I mean? Like the whole myth of the pilgrims that went through some great peril and then had a lovely dinner with Native Americans. Like, that's false. It's not real. And why are we teaching this bullshit to our children? It's not right. Okay. So step 1, all right, find out whose land you are on. Native.land. They have, it's a website, but they also have an app. I use the app all the time. Anytime I travel anywhere, I go to native.land, the app, and I find out whose land I'm on. And they also have linked resources to the tribal nations websites. So that is an excellent resource to begin the process. So number 1, whose land are you on? Say their name and share some of their stories with your families and friends, right? Do your research. Number 2, what I'm going to do with my family is we're going to begin the day by waking up before sunrise and walking east to greet the sun, which is actually a Navajo tradition, in solidarity with the Alcatraz Red Power movement and the ongoing Indigenous Peoples Sunrise Ceremony. So every year on Alcatraz, which is now a prisoner island off the coast of in the Bay Area, like off the coast of San Francisco, they do an Indigenous people sunrise ceremony. If you are on the East Coast, for all of our East Coast relatives, a lot of the East Coasters, especially the Wampanoag tribe, which is the first tribe on Cape Cod to be colonized, where the Pilgrims landed around Plymouth Rock too. The East Coast relative, they celebrate National Day of Mourning to celebrate the ongoing struggles, the massacre, land theft, rape, and genocide of their people, which, by the way, the genocide of the Native people in the Americas is the largest genocide to have ever happened in the history of humans, right? It's important to, that's the truth, to recognize that. Number 3, have a meal where you reframe Thanksgiving as Truthsgiving and tell the truth of colonization and Indian settler relationships. For kids, this could be a good opportunity to do some research on the histories and creation myths of the First Nations lands that you are on and the First Nations people and their creation myths. A great resource is Seeding Sovereignty. On Instagram, it's Seeding Sovereignty. And their IG page, they recently posted a timeline of colonial resistance. They're also having a 4-mile Truthsgiving. And actually, the one of the co-creators of Seeding Sovereignty, she came up with Truthsgiving in 2018.
Okay.
So that is where Truthsgiving comes from. And then number 5, in the evening, watch the film Gather. It's a film about Native food pathways, Indigenous resistance, and Native sovereignty. It's a lot of it is Native food, but woven into that, like food is so intersectional. Like food is so intersectional with resilience and sovereignty and who we are as people and culture. And so watch the film Gather. Pay for it. I think it's like $10 to rent or $15 or something, but it's completely worth it because you are, you know, you're basically you're paying for something that's important and giving money to that and supporting that. So yeah, those are the 5 things that I plan on doing for Truthsgiving. So those are some ideas, although there's so many things that you can do.
What is rematriation?
Oh, okay. It's different than repatriation, right? Rematriation referring to the mother. Hello. Give it up to the mother. Give it up to the mother.
Yes.
I give it all to the mother. I mean, the fathers are so important also, you know, but let's recognize the earth and the women and the power of creation.
Yeah.
So that's land rematriation. It's not the you know, I actually have been reading about Boudica, which she is the woman, the young woman, because she was a teenager at the time, to lead the revolt in the United Kingdom against the colonization of her people. Because that's part of decolonization. It's like decolonization, it's decolonization of all people, right? And with some people's ancestry, it's a little harder. You know, like I have some European ancestry, and I have barely begun to scratch the surface of decolonizing that part of my history. Like that is hard because that goes so far. But thousands of years ago, Boudica was fighting the Romans and leading a revolt to protect the sovereignty of her people. You know? And it's funny, it's been so healing to read her story because my family's from Argentina, and in Argentina, you know, like we're essentially taught to hate the British because the British took some of our land, took the Falkland Islands and killed so many of our young people and entered into like this war. And so to read that they were colonized as well, to read their their story of resilience and sovereignty has been like very healing for me.
It's so amazing because it's like we all come from Indigenous people all over the world. So where did the like how did that start in history? You know what I mean?
I mean, that's what I was trying to get to the root of with the Boudica book. But you know what I think? I think it's cosmic. I don't think that it started, like, I do think it's cosmic. I think that we've been in the age of Pisces, which, I mean, Pisces are beautiful. If anyone's a Pisces out there, like, don't take it personally. It's just the age that we've been in, okay? But we've been in the age of Pisces for the last few thousand years. And with that comes a separation of self, you know? And I think as we enter, and the whole hierarchy, there is no hierarchy on Earth. That doesn't even make sense. there is no hierarchy, because we are all interdependent of one another. And if we're all interdependent, how could there be a hierarchy?
Right.
You know, how could there be any form of supremacy, right? Because I do think that as you start to unravel racial supremacy, what you end up coming to is that at some point there was human supremacy. And the two are intertwined. Colonization, racial supremacy, and human supremacy. You can't begin.
Humans first started feeling disconnected to like our plant and sisters and things like that.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I don't know for a fact. I don't know. But if I feel into it, like that is what makes sense to me, that on some level, there was a seed of supremacy, and that grew, right? And what we are doing in this time, in this age of transition into Aquarius, is we are dismantling all of that, you know?
I love that. I'm an Aquarius, so I'm like age of Aquarius.
I'm an Aquarius rising.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah, totally makes sense, girl.
No, but yeah, like you, I felt it since 2012, which is when the age of Aquarius like started being ushered in, which is what the Mayan calendar was even about. It was like, no, this is just the end of this age, you know, but like ever since 2012, even seeing like, you know, the way psychedelics are being used as medicine now in, you know, big pharma, and like, you know, the way veganism is becoming more mainstream, the way like, you know, Ayurvedic and yogic practices are becoming more mainstream, like all of these like down to the root, you know, like chakral tendencies of like
the root. Yes.
Yeah, like, really tapping back into that as a society. And I'm so happy because like, you know, I think it's only up from here, you know, in that regard. Like we're only going to be not even up. That's the wrong word. I more mean like spherical. Like, we're more going to be like expanding into this ourselves. And it's really beautiful to be in the age of Aquarius. I'm so happy to be staying.
Yeah, I do see that there is a rise of Indigenous nations. There's a rise of all people.
Right.
You know, because, you know, what colonization does, it's everyone is affected. Even if you identify as a settler, which a lot of the people in the United States, they are settlers, like that's just the truth. You know, until we have the native people of the land that we are on reach the highest positions of power in the United States, this is a colony. You know, it's an occupation, and this is occupied territory. And so that's the kind of the reality that we have to face. But I do see that there is a rise of Indigenous cultures that are happening, the Indigenous practices, the Indigenous medical practices of like China, Japan with like acupuncture. You know, there was Mayan acupuncture. The Mayans also had a form of acupuncture, which I don't know if you know this. Do you know that I'm in acupuncture school right now?
No, but I'm not surprised at all.
Like, yeah, I'm in school. It's like an herbology acupuncture program. So, which, I mean, it sounds crazy, but I'm like, oh, this is so the right path, like deepening my relationship, even if it's through academia. Like, you know, yeah, I have my own issues with academia because I think it invisibilizes like other forms of like land-based pedagogy and land-based learning. But aside from that, like it feels like the right path. But what I'm learning now is that, you know, like my school is mostly Chinese medicine based, but I'm like, yo, the Mayans also had acupuncture. They were using the spines and the needles of plants and then putting them into people, and they had almost the exact same points.
I find that so incredible how many cultures around the world were still like, even that is like shows how connected we are, because, you know, like the Mayans had no idea about the Egyptians building pyramids, but somehow like, you know, everybody was tapping into looking at like deities, like the deities in Indonesia and like Southeast Asia looking like the deities of the Americas, you know, like it's just so incredible how intertwined our world as a human is always.
Totally. Well, oh my gosh.
So I have a question. Let's plug your podcast. You're starting a podcast, Plant.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Plant Cesters. Yes. Plant Cesters. I already did my first interview with someone who biked across the United States, Turtle Island, for 9 weeks. And then I'm what?
What's Turtle Island?
Oh, Turtle Island is amongst like basically in Indian country, people don't call the United States anymore. People are saying Turtle Island, And I think it's really important to start referring to lands by their native names. So Manhattan, for example, is actually Manhattan. Canarsie is, you know, in New York, that's a tribe that lived in Brooklyn.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's really important. Like, it's really important. Like if you go to my Instagram, for example, you'll see a pin, and wherever I am, I put the native name of the land that I'm on. And I just actually got here 2 days ago. So I should probably change it from Chumash territory, which is where I usually live, in Topanga Canyon, and Chumash territory. Now I'm on Hohokam ancestral lands. So, but it is important to recognize. What?
I've seen pictures of like the turtle with the earth on their back. Is it related to that concept?
You know, I think it's related to the myths of, I bet you there are multiple myths that refer to turtles, but I'm familiar with Sky Woman falling from the sky. And as she fell, which, by the way, in a lot of mythologies, people are falling from the sky, which makes me wonder if we're like all aliens, but that's another thing.
I identify as an Earthling, but I'm sure that, you know, I have some alien ancestry in me.
That's how I feel.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, this is like interview part 2 that we can get into aliens, because I can talk for a long time.
Talk about aliens.
Dude, I've actually had multiple alien experiences, but that's a whole other thing, okay?
Arizona, were they in Arizona?
The most recent one was the other day in Joshua Tree. And I wrote a song about it, actually. I don't know why I didn't bring my guitar to play you guys music, but I wrote a song about it, but it felt like a spacecraft landed. I don't know what really happened, but I was like floating out of my body, and I was with my friend Kanoa, and I'm like, Kanoa, did we do mushrooms? Like, did I take any edibles? Did we smoke weed? Like, what happened? Like, why do I feel like I'm floating out of my body? And we were totally sober. Like, no, we hadn't, you know, done anything. Right. And he's like, I don't know. No, we haven't done anything. And I'm like, why do I feel this way? Was there something in I started like going through all the checks, like why am I feeling this way? And it didn't make sense. And then at one point I started feeling like snakes were like coming out of me, like the snake spirits, which is kind of like a Kundalini rising type of thing. In yoga, they talk so much about the snake rising, but it literally felt like not just one snake, it felt like multiple snakes coming out of me. And I remember I was going like this and my eyes were closed, and I could have stopped it, but I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to like let this happen. And then as we were driving back to our campsite in Joshua Tree in the middle of the desert, I received a 911 phone call where I don't have any reception. And I remember I had this distinct feeling like, you know what? I feel like this is something trying to communicate with me electronically. Like, it's just too weird to receive a 911 call.
Did you answer?
And then what?
Did you answer it?
I don't know why I pressed end. I think I was a little freaked out. Now I wish I'd answered it. But my instinct at the time was to press end because, like, what the fuck, 911 is calling me? No, like,
right.
You know? And then when we got to our campsite, multiple people had been having similar experiences where they felt like they were high coming out of their bodies. There was someone's dog that was running and running and running around, and they were scared and they were barking. So it's like, it wasn't just me, like multiple people were feeling it.
Also,
what?
That happening in Mexico, also completely sober. This was around December 21st, 2012. And I was in Palenque, so like very close to the Mayan ruins.
Yeah.
It was 11 p.m. I don't know, like super dark out. And out of nowhere, the entire sky goes like bright blue. And then a silver thing comes like crashing down. And it was insane. And all of us in the car are just like, what the fuck? Because the entire sky went went bright blue for just like a millisecond, right? And then we went to our campsite. And yeah, one of the guys there was like, I just had contact with an alien. Like, they only telepathically communicated, he was saying.
Wow.
But, you know, he didn't know that we had just seen that, you know?
Totally.
Yeah.
I thank you for sharing that story. Have you had any, like, coming out of that, were there any other developments or like developments or realizations from what you had seen?
Well, a few days after that, I went to the Time and Space Festival, also sober, by the way.
Cool.
No, just saying, like, this was completely, like, there's no...
Yeah.
you know, and
I believe you, because same. I believe you,
right.
same. Like
the viewers at home, but I was at the Time and Space Festival on the beach in Tulum or Playa del Carmen, I don't know, but in Mexico, right?
Yeah.
And I tell you, it was the craziest thing I had ever seen, because it felt like the Earth was a stadium.
Yeah.
There was about 100 UFOs in the sky watching. Like there were straight up silver,
yes.
like hundreds of silver lights parked in the sky watching.
Have you been to Disclosure Fest in LA?
No.
The last Disclosure Fest that happened this last year, there were like 20 UFOs in the sky. Like, it's so crazy, because like a couple of years ago, I never would have believed in this stuff. But I have had so many experiences in the last 2 years that I'm just like, there is no doubt in my mind. Like, this is to me, it's so obvious. So, I was at Disclosure Fest, and the same thing. There were like 20 UFOs in the sky. They were just like popping in and out, and they were kind of around the sun, and we were all looking at them, you know, and they were just there. Actually, I have a UFO video I can send you.
I would love
from Mount Shasta. Okay.
I would love to see it.
I've been meaning to post it. So
is there guitar around you anywhere? By the way, we didn't even talk about how we met. When we met, you were living in an ecodome.
Oh yeah. I was living in an Adobe Village. Never ends. So
yeah, you were living in a community where every house was made completely out of the earth, right?
Yeah. I think we do use some barbed wire in some of our builds. But only 3% is not built from the earth. Everything else is like earth built. Oh, yeah. On Thursday, I'm having an IGTV live conversation with a friend of mine. So yeah, like stay involved, stay on my Instagram. You'll stay up to date.
Really quickly, also, Kumaya, they live on both sides of the border. You said they live in Arizona and in Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
And so how does that affect them as a people?
I mean, just think about it. On one side of the border, I mean, it creates an artificial scarcity of resources. It creates a situation where some of them have trouble visiting their ancestral lands for ceremony. Like for the people on the Mexican side to come over for ceremony on this side, it actually is difficult because they don't have a Kumeyaay port of entry. They have to go through San Diego or Mexicali. And so it's just, you know, that's something that the Kumeyaay are working on right now. The elders are working on building a Kumeyaay port of entry. Yeah, I mean, honestly, like there's just so much work to be done. Like there's so many amazing things that are happening in all across Indian country, right? And it's just like where do you live and how can you support those efforts? How can you support the sovereignty of the people on the land that you live on? How can you effectively support the health of the land, you know? But yeah, goes deep.
I love it.
Yeah, so
scratch the surface of so many things.
It's what?
I feel like we barely scratched the surface of so many important
Totally.
topics.
I feel yeah. I also miss you. I feel like I haven't seen you in a long time.
I'll see you soon, baby. I'll see you.
Okay. So it's not a full song yet. I just started writing it down. But basically I had this experience where these like snakes, I felt the snakes in me, and I was in the middle of the desert, and then I came to Phoenix, and it just like it came through as a song. But it came through as a country song, which is really weird. I've never written a country song before, so I mean, the melody came through. Still have to work on the verses and stuff. I see the snakes, they're moving through me. I'm in the desert, these stars renew me. When a spacecraft landed, felt like they knew me. My spirit began to rise. It felt quite groovy, yeah.
I see the snakes, they're moving through me, yeah. I'm in the desert, these stars renew me. Listen for the alien part. When the spacecraft landed, felt like they knew me, yeah, yeah. My spirit began to rise, it felt quite groovy, yeah.
I love it. Amazing.
I don't know why it came through as like a country song about aliens, but fuck it, when a song comes through, it just comes through. There's nothing you can do.
That's divine intervention, baby. So do you know your life path number?
11.
Oh, you're a master number.
Yeah, babe.
How could I?
I don't even know what that means, but whenever I tell people I'm 11, they're like, oh, master number. Are there like multiple master numbers?
The most capable of creating your, well, everybody's capable, but like you are the most in touch with like creating your own reality, basically.
Oh,
and,
totally.
Like, yeah, you are extremely, like, once you put your head to it, like you're able to tap in and maximize your full potential to whatever you want to create in the world. Like, that's what it means.
What are you?
I'm a 5.
Oh.
So it pretty much means that I like value freedom above all else. And
I see that.
I like to, like, you know, taste the flavors of the universe. I'm a nomad pretty much, I think, you know, and I'm happy.
I'm a nomad too. I'm descended from 2 tribes of nomadic people, you know?
Me too. Actually,
oh yeah, you're right.
I don't know. Like,
we are both descended from nomadic people.
Gypsies are nomadic, obviously.
Ooh,
I didn't
whoa.
Before I go, something really crazy that you would appreciate about the Yakuts. So they're indigenous Siberians, right?
Yeah.
And on my ancestry, I got 5% India, Pakistan as well, which I've always like identified with like Indian culture. Like people would call me Indian girl all the time. But I was still really surprised to see that because I was like, oh, well, I guess this makes sense, but still. And so then I started doing research, and 3,000 to 5,000 years ago, the Indians migrated to Siberia, and they share DNA.
Totally makes sense. Yeah.
That shit was so mind-boggling.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Like, we've been nomads our whole life. You know what I mean?
I mean, dude, that's where we come from. That's why it's like so ridiculous to like the whole immigration debate. I'm like, people migrate. Like, what the like? That's who we are.
I know.
It does from like a human perspective, from like a real human perspective. I'm like, none of this makes sense.
Also, by the way, in life path in numerology, I've been super into numerology in the last year.
I love it.
But odd numbers are like more similar and more intertwined and like make better mates, and then the same thing for even numbers. So like it makes sense. Like I identify a lot with like 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, you know, like because when you're an 11 you're also a 1.
Oh, okay, so what you're saying is we should get married,
basically. Yes.
Duh. Like I have no ring, like
let's go.
I'm waiting, Roxy.
I love it.
But I want a moonstone because I don't believe in diamonds. Like
me too. Brilliant Earth. Everybody should look it up.
Brilliant Earth. What's that?
Brilliant Earth is a gemstone, a company that like, you know, does fair trade, like, you know, engagement and wedding rings and stuff like that. They do have diamonds on there also, but I also don't want a diamond because
yeah, dude, I want to do like a moonstone or turquoise or something, like
opal with maybe some turquoise or emerald or sapphire.
Okay, I will get you opal. You get me turquoise. How about that?
Happy Truthsgiving, Jay Connor.
Yeah, Truthsgiving. I want everyone to check out Seeding Sovereignty. The woman who started Truthsgiving, she's co-created Seeding Sovereignty. They're an excellent resource to go to. Go to native.land, find out whose land you're living on. Check out my page, Supersonic Nava, Nava. I have some programming online and in person in LA this weekend. I won't be in LA, but my creative collaborator is in LA, Marvin Cerritos, and we are both fundraising for the Kumeyaay people. So let's all do our part.
Well, baby girl. Any closing thoughts or statements or anything you'd like to share other than the plug?
Yeah, Plantcestors. I mean, I'm plugging Plantcestors. It's dropping December 22nd, the day after the winter solstice. The reason I'm doing that is because I'm going to, the Kumeyaay elders invited me to go to a sacred mountain site where there are some cave paintings from their ancestors. And apparently on the winter solstice, like light beams in through the cave and hits the eye of one of the cave paintings. So we're going to go watch that. That's in Mexico. Yeah, in Mexico, on the other side of the border. But, you know, it's, you know, Mexico. It's on Kumeyaay land, like outside of San Diego, but in Mexico. And so we're going to be doing that. And then I'm going to drop the podcast the day afterwards, which I'm so excited about. It's all about our ancestral relationships to plants. I'm interviewing some amazing people. The first episode is on democracy. You know, I think you got a taste of that, of what I was just saying here. So like tune in. I think I feel like I have a mission to drive forward. Like I feel that very, very strongly. Especially because I'm like maybe retiring from fencing, which we didn't even talk about.
There was too much other stuff to talk about.
I'm World Cup champion.
World Cup fencing champion on Earth.
Yeah, I'm World Cup champion and 4-time U.S. national champion. And now I'm shedding the skin of the warrior and I'm returning to the earth. So I'm shedding hard. So.
Going from warrior to shaman.
Ooh, yeah, I like that.
Actually, so one more question I have for you. Are there, like, do you feel like there's a season in your life for different plants? And like, are there any plants that you feel specifically in tune with? Yeah,
so I've been feeling really in tune to Datura recently. If you look on my Instagram, like I actually did an entire portrait on what I imagined the spirit of Datura to look like if she was like a woman in her like 40s or something. And that's one of my recent posts. But Datura is one of the plants that I've been like super connected with. I live on like an amazing farm, and I was telling a Mayan elder friend of my friends and I, Tata Jose, about one of the plants after a cacao ceremony about Datura, and the Datura ended up dropping like some pollen into my mouth. And Datura is a psychedelic plant. Like I am not trying to take Datura or anything like that. But as I was smelling it, pollen. So I'm sure you've seen it. You know the wild cucumber, that moon blooming? It only blooms at night. It's like it's white, bats pollinated and stuff. Okay, I'm gonna take you.
In touch with the plants. I
am taking you on a trip.
Investors.
I'm taking you on a trip with me, like in person, but also like I'll probably talk about Datura and plant ancestors. But I mean, that's the plant I've been connected to recently. There's wild tobacco that grows all over the Santa Monica Mountains. When I go to Sweat Lodge or whenever I start any fire, I begin by offering tobacco. So I regularly pick tobacco. I usually carry tobacco seeds when I go to gatherings, and I give the tobacco seeds to people so that they can start growing it, because it really is a sacred, freaking amazing plant for prayer.
How did tobacco, I mean, let's talk about the colonization of tobacco while we're.
Yeah. I swear we have so much to talk about, Roxy.
Yeah, no, we'll get off here. But one last thing.
Yeah.
Because now that you brought up tobacco, how did tobacco go from being such a sacred, offering plant to like being what it is now?
I mean, look at cocaine. It comes from coca. My mom, growing up in South America, used to have coca tea. My grandmother's name is Coca. Actually, that's my grandmother's name. Or like her nickname. Her name is Emilia, but people called her Coca. Like coca is a sacred plant. All of these plants. Look at chocolate. Look at cacao. And how it's like basically giving people diabetes now. It's like whenever you have these strong medicines, or most pharmaceuticals that actually come from plants, whenever you have these strong medicines and you don't respect the plants, and you're not you know, you're not getting your information of how to harvest and what to do, and you're not living in reciprocity with the plant itself and with the earth, you're going to end up adulterating these plants and changing their medicine. And, you know, one time the land spirits of the land that I live on in Topanga, well, at my old house, but also Topanga Canyon, I still live in Topanga Canyon. One time the land spirits gave me this example of a raid that was happening. They're like, let's say the apocalypse happens. A raid. They said, let's say the apocalypse happened. I lived across the street from the homesteading school, which was like a horse property, and they would do a lot of homesteading stuff. They had a preschool. And anyways, they were homesteaders that had a preschool. It was really cool. And they said, what if people break into the homesteading school and start stealing all of their food, right? What do you think the people that live there would do? They would start hiding things, right? They would start hiding things in the pantries, hiding things in the barn. They would start hiding their medicines, hiding their food. Now, what if people came up to them and said, you know, we're really, really hungry. Will you teach us to live off the land? Will you teach us to harvest our own food? Will you share your medicine? They would gladly share their medicine. And it's the same thing with plants. Right. If we ask permission to pick from the plants, if we ask permission, if we offer things to the plants before we pick, if we do it in a way that's consensual, the plants want to share their medicine. If not, they hide it. And so that's the basis. That's where it starts. You know, it's not asking permission. There's a reason why consent is a conversation that really needs to happen now, is because we haven't been asking for consent.
And it happen with all people, as in
with people,
the tree, the fish, everything.
When I teach my foraging classes to kids, I'll teach 3- and 6-year-old kids, and the first thing I teach is consent. And it's such an easy concept. Talking about consent, it like literally, it's like nothing to them. They're like, oh, of course, we're eating the body of it. We're eating and touching and grabbing the body of another person. Of course we need consent. And that's a concept that if you can learn at 3, 4, 5 years old, you're going to carry that for the rest of your life.
Exactly.
You know?
You're doing beautiful work. And I agree with Instagram Lib. We are a generation of spiritual orphans. Finding in our desolation the drive and desire to be built from source. Yo, that speaks
Bro.
very deeply.
Oof.
Thank you for your energy and your knowledge. You are incredible. I can't wait.
Oh, I love you.
Truthsgiving. I love you so much.
Let's go to Sedona.
We will.
All right. I love everyone out there. There's so much work to be done. Find the way to do the work in the land that you live on. But it starts with honoring the people of the land, the people who were the First Nations people of the land that you live on. Like, honor those people. Like, get to know whose land are we on. That's important.
Step 1. Okay.
And follow me on Instagram, Supersonic Nava, Nava. Love ya. Thanks for having me, Roxy.
Of course. Thank you.